The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet countryside road as Sergeant Thomas Mitchell struggled with his broken-down Land Rover. The green military vehicle sat stubbornly silent, steam rising from under its hood like morning mist. Thomas wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grease across his skin. He had been driving back to Windsor Castle after a weekend leave when the engine suddenly gave up on him. Thomas was not just any soldier. He wore the distinctive red tunic and tall black bearskin hat of the Queen's Guard, one of the most elite units in the British Army. His uniform was impeccable, his boots polished to mirror perfection, and his posture straight as an arrow, even in this frustrating moment. He had served Her Majesty for 15 years, standing motionless outside Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, protecting the royal family with unwavering dedication. The road stretched empty in both directions, bordered by rolling green fields dotted with sheep. Thomas pulled out his mobile phone, hoping to call for assistance, but the signal bars showed nothing. He was truly stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no houses in sight, and his duty shift starting in just 2 hours. The thought of being late filled him with dread. Punctuality was sacred in the Guard. He lifted the hood again and stared at the complicated maze of pipes, wires, and metal parts. Steam continued to escape, and a strange rattling sound came from deep within the engine. Thomas knew enough about engines to understand that this was serious. The radiator had clearly overheated, but there seemed to be something more fundamentally wrong. Without proper tools or spare parts, he felt completely helpless. As he stood there, contemplating his options, a small figure appeared on the horizon. At first it looked like a dot moving along the roadside, but as it came closer, Thomas could see it was a young girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. She had curly brown hair that bounced with each step and wore a simple blue dress with grass stains on the knees. Her small hands carried a wicker basket, and she walked with the confident stride of someone who knew these country roads. Well, the girl noticed the stranded soldier and immediately changed direction, heading straight toward him. Most children would be intimidated by a tall man in military uniform, but she showed no fear whatsoever. Instead, her bright green eyes sparkled with curiosity and what looked like genuine concern for his situation. "Hello," there she called out cheerfully as she approached. "Are you having trouble with your car?" Thomas was surprised by her directness and lack of shyness. "Yes, I'm afraid so," he replied, instinctively straightening his posture even more. "The engine has overheated. I'm not sure what else might be wrong with it." The girl set down her basket and walked around the Land Rover, examining it with the serious expression of someone much older. She peered under the hood, studied the wheels, and even checked the exhaust pipe. Thomas watched in amazement as this tiny person conducted what appeared to be a thorough inspection of his vehicle. "My daddy fixes cars," she announced matter-of-factly. "He taught me lots of things about engines. This one looks like it needs water first, but I think there's probably a loose belt too. See how it's hanging down there?" Thomas bent down to look where she was pointing, and sure enough, there was a belt that had come completely off its pulleys. He had been so focused on the overheating problem that he had missed this crucial detail. The girl's sharp eyes had spotted something he had overlooked entirely. "You're absolutely right," he said, genuinely impressed. "But I don't have any tools with me. There's no water source nearby." The girl smiled mysteriously and picked up her basket. "I know where we can get both," she said with confidence. "There's a stream just through those trees, and my daddy keeps tools in our shed. It's not far from here." Thomas hesitated. He had been trained never to leave his post or abandon his duties, but technically, he was off duty and stranded. More importantly, this child seemed to be his only hope of getting back to the castle on time. Something about her mature demeanor and obvious knowledge made him trust her. "Judgment, are you sure it's safe for you to help a stranger?" he asked, wanting to make sure she wasn't putting herself at risk. The girl looked at him with those wise green eyes and said, "Something that would stay with him forever. My grandmother always said that when someone needs help, we should give it freely, especially to those who serve others." There was something profound in the way she said it, something that suggested wisdom beyond her years. Thomas felt a strange warmth in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite identify. This little girl, alone on a country road, was offering to help him when no one else could. As they walked toward the trees she had mentioned, Thomas noticed something glinting on the girl's finger. It was partially hidden by the handle of her basket, but it looked like a ring of some sort. The morning light caught it briefly before she shifted her grip, and Thomas caught just a glimpse of what appeared to be an ornate design. "What's your name?" he asked as they made their way across the field. "Emma," she replied simply. Emma rose. "What's yours?" "Sergeant Thomas Mitchell," he answered formally. "I serve in Her Majesty's Guard." Emma nodded, as if this information was perfectly ordinary. "I thought so from your uniform. It's very smart." "Do you protect the Queen?" "I do," Thomas replied, feeling a surge of pride. "It's the greatest honor of my life." Emma smiled at this, but there was something in her expression that Thomas couldn't quite read. It was almost as if she knew something he didn't, as if his words had special meaning for her. But before he could think more about it, they reached the edge of the trees, and Emma was already pointing toward a clear stream that bubbled over smooth stones. The adventure was just beginning, and Thomas had no idea how much this chance encounter would change his understanding of service, duty, and the true meaning of royalty. The stream was perfect, clear cold water flowing steadily over smooth pebbles. Emma knelt beside it without hesitation, cupping her small hands to taste the water first. "It's good," she declared, then looked around until she found a large leaf. She showed Thomas how to fashion it into a makeshift container. "Folding the edges just so, my grandmother taught me this," Emma explained as she demonstrated the technique. She said, "Nature provides everything we need if we know how to look." Thomas watched in fascination as this young girl displayed survival skills that many adults lacked. She moved with purpose and confidence, as if solving problems in the wilderness was something she did every day. He began to wonder about her background. What kind of child knew so much about both car engines and outdoor survival? Together, they collected several leaf containers full of water. Emma insisted on carrying her share, despite Thomas's protests that the containers were too heavy for her small hands. As they walked back toward the road, she began telling him about the area. "That hill over there is where the old castle ruins are," she said, pointing to a distant rise. "People say knights used to live there hundreds of years ago. And beyond those woods is where the royal estate begins." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "The royal estate? We're that close to Windsor?" Emma nodded casually. "Oh yes, just a few miles. Sometimes we see the royal cars driving past on their way to London. Once, I even saw the Queen herself through the window." The way she said it struck Thomas as odd. Most people would be excited about seeing royalty, but Emma spoke about it as if it were perfectly ordinary. There was no breathlessness, no sense of awe, just a simple statement of fact. When they reached the Land Rover, Emma immediately got to work. She poured the water carefully into the radiator, checking the level with her finger like an experienced mechanic. "Not too much at first," she warned. "If the engine is too hot, the water could crack something." Thomas marveled at her knowledge. "Where did you learn all this?" "Daddy taught me and Grandmother taught him," Emma replied. She always said that practical knowledge was more valuable than fancy education. Anyone can learn facts from books, but real wisdom comes from understanding how things work. As the radiator filled, Emma turned her attention to the loose belt. She studied it carefully, tracing its path with her finger. "We need to get this back on, but first we need to loosen this tension bolt here." She pointed to a specific spot that Thomas wouldn't have identified on his own. "The tools are at our cottage," Emma continued. "It's just through those trees, past the stream. Daddy's away on business, but I know where everything is kept." Thomas hesitated again. Following a strange child to an isolated cottage went against every security protocol he had ever learned. But Emma seemed to sense his reluctance. "You can trust me," she said simply, looking directly into his eyes. "I promise you'll be safe, and I promise we can fix your car." There was something in her voice, quality of absolute certainty that Thomas found both surprising and comforting. Against his better judgment, he decided to trust her. The walk to the cottage took them through a beautiful stretch of countryside. Ancient oak trees formed a natural canopy overhead, and wildflowers carpeted the forest floor. Birds sang in the branches, and Thomas could hear the distant sound of the stream they had visited earlier. "It's peaceful here," Thomas remarked, feeling some of his stress begin to fade away. "Grandmother always said that nature has a way of healing worried minds." Emma replied. She spent a lot of time walking in these woods, especially when she had important decisions to make, as they emerged from the trees. Thomas saw a charming stone cottage with ivy climbing up its walls. The garden was immaculate, with roses blooming in neat rows and vegetables growing in carefully tended plots. A small shed stood to one side, and Emma headed straight for it. "Here we are," she announced, producing a key from under a flower pot. The shed was organized with military precision. Tools hung on pegboards. Spare parts were sorted into labeled boxes. Everything had its proper place. Emma selected a socket wrench set with practiced ease. "This should do it," she said confidently. "Daddy always says that half the job is using the right tool." As they gathered what they needed, Thomas noticed several framed photographs on a workbench. One showed a middle-aged man in military dress uniform, standing at attention beside what appeared to be a government building. Another showed the same man shaking hands with someone whose face Thomas couldn't quite make out from his angle. "Is that your father?" Thomas asked, pointing to the uniformed man. Emma glanced at the photo and nodded. "Yes, that's Daddy. He's away on special duties right now," she said it matter-of-factly. But Thomas detected a note of sadness in her voice. "Does he serve in the military too?" Emma paused in her tool selection. "Something like that," she said quietly. "He protects important people, just like you do." Thomas felt a sudden kinship with this absent father. He understood the challenges of military life, the long separations and the weight of responsibility. It explained Emma's maturity and self-reliance. She was clearly used to taking care of herself as they prepared to return to the Land Rover. Emma carefully locked the shed and returned the key to its hiding place. Thomas noticed again the ring on her finger, catching more glimpses of what appeared to be an intricate design. In the better light of the garden, he could see it was definitely not a child's toy ring, but something substantial and well-crafted. "That's an interesting ring," commented casually as they walked back through the woods. Emma looked down at her hand, as if she had forgotten she was wearing it. "Oh, this? It belonged to my grandmother. She gave it to me before she... Emma's voice trailed off, and she quickly changed the subject. "Come on, let's get your car fixed." "You said you needed to be back at the castle soon." Thomas sensed there was more to the story, but he didn't push. Emma had already shown him more kindness than he had any right to expect, and he respected her privacy. Still, something about the ring nagged at him. The glimpses he had caught suggested it was far more valuable than anything a country cottage family would typically possess. As they emerged from the woods, the Land Rover came into view, still sitting disabled on the quiet road. But Thomas felt optimistic for the first time since breaking down. With Emma's help and knowledge, he might actually make it back to his duties on time. What he didn't realize was that fixing the car would be the easy part. The real revelation was still to come. Back at the Land Rover, Emma immediately set to work with the confidence of someone twice her age. She selected the correct socket from the wrench set and began loosening the tension bolt she had identified earlier. Thomas watched in amazement as her small fingers worked with practiced precision. "Hold this end of the belt," she instructed, positioning Thomas's larger hands exactly where she needed them. "When I get the tension right, we'll slip it back onto the pulleys." Thomas had repaired vehicles before during his military training, but he had never worked alongside someone so young who displayed such mechanical aptitude. Emma's movements were economical and purposeful. With no wasted motion or hesitation, "There," she said with satisfaction, as the belt slipped into place. "Now we need to tighten it just enough. Too loose, and it will slip off again. Too tight, and it will snap." She adjusted the tension with careful precision, testing it with her finger to check the flexibility. Thomas realized he was witnessing expertise that came from genuine understanding, not just memorized procedures. "My grandmother always said that mechanical things have their own language," Emma explained as she worked. "If you listen carefully, they tell you what they need, as if to prove her point." She placed her ear near the engine and listened intently. "The belt sounds right now," she announced. "Let's add a bit more water to the radiator, then we can try starting it." Thomas followed her instructions, pouring the remaining water they had collected into the cooling system. Throughout the entire repair process, Emma had maintained complete focus and competence. It was only now, as they prepared for the moment of truth, that Thomas saw a flicker of normal childlike excitement in her eyes. "Cross your fingers," she said with a grin. Stepping back as Thomas climbed into the driver's seat, Thomas turned the key. And the engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. The sound was strong and steady, with none of the rattling or irregular rhythm from before. Steam no longer rose from under the hood, and all the warning lights on the dashboard had gone out. "You did it," Thomas exclaimed, genuinely amazed. "Emma, you're absolutely brilliant." Emma beamed with pride, but there was something humble in her expression too. Grandmother always said that helping others was the most important thing we could do with our knowledge. Thomas climbed out of the Land Rover and knelt down to Emma's eye level. "I don't know how to thank you. You've saved my career. Being late for duty would have been a serious mark against me." "You don't need to thank me," Emma replied. "But maybe you could tell me what it's really like, protecting the Queen?" Thomas smiled, happy to share something that might interest this remarkable child. "It's the greatest honor imaginable. Every day I stand guard knowing that I'm protecting someone who represents everything good about our country. The Queen is wise, kind, and dedicated to serving others. She puts duty above everything else, even her own comfort." Emma listened intently, her green eyes never leaving his face. "What's she like as a person? I mean, when she's not being the Queen?" Thomas thought carefully about how to answer. "Even when she's not in public, she never stops being the Queen. But from what I've observed, she's someone who cares deeply about people. She remembers the names of staff members' children, asks about their families, and always has time for a kind word. She carries herself with dignity, but she's not cold or distant." "Does she ever get lonely?" Emma asked quietly. The question surprised Thomas. Most people asked about the crown jewels or the palace ceremonies, but Emma was thinking about the human side of royalty. "I think sometimes she must," Thomas answered honestly. "The crown is heavy in more ways than one. But she has people who love her, her family, and millions of subjects who respect and admire her." Emma nodded thoughtfully, then glanced at her wrist where a simple watch showed the time. "You should get going," she said. "You don't want to be late." Thomas realized she was right. The repair had taken nearly an hour, and he needed to drive back to Windsor, change into a fresh uniform, and report for duty. But something made him reluctant to leave this extraordinary child. "Emma," he said carefully, "are you sure you'll be all right here alone? Where exactly do you live?" Emma pointed vaguely toward the trees. "The cottage isn't far, and I'm used to taking care of myself. Daddy will be back soon." Thomas felt uneasy about leaving her, but Emma seemed perfectly capable and confident. Still, something didn't quite add up. The cottage had been well maintained and clearly expensive. The tools were professional grade. Emma's education seemed far beyond what most country children received. "What does your father do exactly?" Thomas asked. "You mentioned he protects important people." Emma hesitated for the first time since they had met. "He works for the government," she said simply. "Sometimes his job takes him away." As Thomas prepared to leave, Emma stepped forward and did something unexpected. She reached up and straightened his uniform tie, which had become askew during their repair work. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Now you look properly smart for the Queen." Her touch was gentle but assured. Thomas noticed again the ring on her finger. This time, with her hand so close, he got a clear look at it. His breath caught in his throat. The ring was made of white gold, or platinum, with an intricate pattern of roses and thistles worked into the band. But it was the central stone that made Thomas's. Heart Race, a large sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds in a setting he recognized immediately. It was identical to one of the pieces he had seen in photographs of the Crown Jewels collection. More specifically, it looked exactly like one of the Queen's personal rings, one she wore for informal occasions and private functions. Thomas tried to keep his expression neutral. but his mind was racing. How could a country child possess something so valuable and distinctive? The ring had to be worth thousands of pounds, far beyond the means of anyone living in a rural cottage. "That's a beautiful ring," he managed to say casually. "It looks very old." Emma glanced down at it again, and for the first time, Thomas saw something guarded in her expression. "Yes," she said quietly. "It's been in our family for a long time." The way she said "our family" carried a weight that Thomas couldn't quite interpret. But before he could ask any more questions, Emma was stepping back and waving goodbye. "You really must go now," she said firmly. "Thank you for letting me help. I enjoyed meeting someone who serves the Queen." Thomas climbed into the Land Rover. But as he prepared to drive away, he rolled down the window. "Emma, if you're ever in any trouble, or if you need anything, ask anyone at Windsor Castle for Sergeant Thomas Mitchell. They'll know how to find me." Emma smiled, and for just a moment, her expression held something regal and distant. "I'll remember that," she said. "Drive safely, Sergeant." As Thomas drove away, he kept glancing in his rearview mirror until Emma's small figure disappeared from view. The encounter had been extraordinary in every way, but now questions tumbled through his mind. Who was this remarkable child, really? How had she come to possess what appeared to be a piece of royal jewelry? And why did he have the strangest feeling that their meeting had been more significant than a simple roadside repair? The answers would have to wait until he reached Windsor Castle. But Thomas had a growing suspicion that his duties might take on new meaning when he learned the truth about Emma Rose. Thomas drove back to Windsor Castle with his mind churning. The Land Rover ran perfectly thanks to Emma's expert repairs, but he could barely focus on the road. The image of that distinctive ring kept flashing in his memory. The sapphire surrounded by diamonds, the intricate pattern of roses and thistles, the unmistakable craftsmanship of the crown jewels workshop. He arrived at the castle with 20 minutes to spare before his shift began. After parking in the designated area for guard vehicles, Thomas hurried to the barracks to change into a fresh uniform. His fellow guardsmen were already preparing for duty, polishing their boots and adjusting their ceremonial helmets, cutting it close today. "Mitchell," commented Corporal Davies, a friend who had served alongside Thomas for several years. "Car trouble?" "Something like that," Thomas replied, his mind still occupied with thoughts of Emma as he dressed. He found himself wondering if he should report the encounter to his superiors. But what would he say? That he had met a child who might be wearing royal jewelry? It sounded absurd, even in his own mind. As Thomas took his position outside the castle's main entrance, he tried to focus on his duties. Standing guard required complete concentration and awareness of everything happening around the perimeter. But today, his thoughts kept drifting back to the cottage in the woods. To Emma's wise green eyes and her remarkable knowledge of both mechanical repairs and royal protocols, the morning passed slowly. With the usual parade of tourists taking photographs and hoping to see a guardsman react to their antics, Thomas maintained his stoic expression and perfect posture. But internally, he was reviewing every detail of his encounter with Emma. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that there was something extraordinary about that child. During his lunch break, Thomas made a decision. He sought out Captain Reynolds, his commanding officer, a veteran soldier who had served the royal family for over 25 years. If anyone would know what to make of Thomas's strange morning, it would be Reynolds. Sir Thomas began carefully. "I had an unusual encounter this morning that I think you should know about." "Captain?" Reynolds looked up from his paperwork with interest. Thomas was known for his reliability and level-headedness. If he thought something was worth reporting, it probably was. Thomas recounted the morning's events. From the breakdown, to Emma's mechanical expertise, to the mysterious ring. He tried to be objective and factual, but he could see Reynolds becoming increasingly attentive as the story progressed. "Describe this ring again," Reynolds said when Thomas finished. Thomas closed his eyes and recalled every detail he could remember. White gold or platinum band with roses and thistles worked into the design. Central sapphire, quite large, surrounded by smaller diamonds. The craftsmanship looked extremely fine. Museum quality. Reynolds was quiet for a long moment, then picked up his telephone. "I need to make some inquiries," he said. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Sergeant. You may return to your duties." Thomas left the captain's office feeling both relieved and worried. He had done his duty by reporting the incident, but he found himself concerned about Emma. What if his report caused problems for her family? What if they were in some kind of trouble? The afternoon shift passed even more slowly than the morning. Thomas found himself scanning every vehicle that passed through the castle gates, wondering if he might see Emma or her father. But the endless stream of official cars, tourist buses, and delivery trucks revealed no familiar faces. It was nearly evening when Thomas was summoned back to Captain Reynolds' office. This time he found two other men present, one in civilian clothes, who had the bearing of someone from intelligence services, and another in the uniform of a senior royal household official. Sergeant Mitchell Reynolds began. "I'd like you to tell these gentlemen about your encounter this morning." Thomas repeated his story once more, with the newcomers asking detailed questions about Emma's appearance, her knowledge, and especially about the ring. The civilian took notes throughout, occasionally exchanging meaningful glances with the household official. "Sergeant," the household official said when Thomas finished, "what you've described is indeed a piece from Her Majesty's personal collection. It's a ring that belonged to Queen Victoria and has been passed down through the royal family for generations." Thomas felt his stomach drop. "Sir, I had no idea." The child seemed completely innocent. "I don't think she realized... The official held up a hand to stop him. "You're not in trouble, Sergeant. In fact, you may have helped us solve a mystery we've been working on for some time." The civilian spoke for the first time. "Tell me about this cottage you visited. Could you find it again?" "Yes, sir. I believe so." And the child seemed to be alone. She said her father was away on business, some kind of government work involving protection duties. The two visitors exchanged another look. "Sergeant Mitchell," the household official said, "I'm going to tell you something that must remain absolutely confidential. Can I trust your discretion?" "Of course, sir. 3 weeks ago, we discovered that several pieces from Her Majesty's private jewelry collection were missing. Not stolen, the security was never breached. But certain items that should have been in the royal safe were simply gone. Items that had great sentimental value to the Queen." Thomas's mind raced. "You think Emma has them?" "We think," the civilian said carefully, "that Emma may be connected to someone who legitimately possesses them. The ring you described was among the missing pieces. But, sir, she's just a child. She can't be more than 8 or 9 years old, indeed. Which is why this situation requires very delicate handling." The household official leaned forward. "Sergeant, we need you to return to that cottage tomorrow morning. But this time, you won't be going alone." Thomas felt a growing sense of unease. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "We need you to make contact with this child again, naturally, and without causing alarm. Meanwhile, we'll have people positioned discreetly in the area to observe. We need to understand who she is and how she came to possess royal jewelry. Sir, I gave Emma my word that she could trust me. I don't want to betray that trust." Captain Reynolds spoke up. "Sergeant, no one is suggesting you do anything to harm the child. But we need to understand this situation. The missing jewelry has connections to state security that I can't discuss with you." The civilian nodded. "There are implications here that go beyond simple theft, Sergeant. We need to know if this child is in danger, if someone is using her, or if there are other factors at play." Thomas thought about Emma's mature demeanor. Her expensive cottage, her father's mysterious government work. Pieces of a puzzle were starting to come together. But the picture they formed was still unclear. "What if she's exactly what she appears to be?" Thomas asked. "A bright child whose family legitimately owns these items. Then we'll apologize for our suspicions and ensure their privacy is respected," the household official replied. "But we have to be certain." As Thomas prepared to leave the meeting, the civilian handed him a card with only a phone number on it. "Call this number the moment you make contact tomorrow. We'll be monitoring the situation, but we won't interfere unless absolutely necessary." Walking back to his quarters that evening, Thomas felt conflicted. His duty was clear. He had to follow orders and help resolve this mystery. But he couldn't shake the memory of Emma's trust, her genuine kindness, and the way she had spoken about service and helping others. Tomorrow would bring answers. But Thomas had a growing feeling that those answers would be more complicated than anyone expected. As he lay in bed that night, he found himself hoping that Emma was safe. Whatever the truth about her identity might be, the ring that had caught his attention was clearly just the beginning of a much larger mystery. One that seemed to touch the very heart of the royal family itself. Thomas barely slept that night. He kept thinking about Emma's trusting eyes and wondering if he was about to betray the faith of someone who had shown him nothing but kindness. When dawn broke, he dressed in civilian clothes as instructed and drove his personal car toward the countryside where he had broken down the day before. The morning mist hung low over the fields, and everything looked different in the early light. Thomas drove slowly, trying to remember exactly where he had encountered Emma. When he spotted the familiar stretch of road, he pulled over and got out, pretending to examine his engine. He waited for nearly an hour, beginning to wonder if Emma only walked this route occasionally, but just as he was starting to give up hope, he saw a small figure in the distance. Carrying the same wicker basket as before, Emma approached with the same confident stride. And when she recognized Thomas, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Sergeant Thomas," she called out, "what brings you back to our quiet road? Please don't tell me your car is broken again." Thomas felt a stab of guilt at her obvious delight in seeing him. "No, the repair you made yesterday is holding perfectly. Actually, I was hoping I might see you again. I realized I never properly thanked you for your help." Emma set down her basket and smiled. "You thanked me plenty yesterday, but I'm glad to see you again too. Did you make it back to the castle on time?" "I did, thanks to you." Thomas hesitated, then made a decision. "Emma, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me." Something in his tone made Emma's expression become more guarded. "What is it?" "That ring you're wearing, where exactly did it come from?" Emma looked down at her hand, and Thomas saw her fingers close slightly, as if to hide the jewelry. "I told you, it belonged to my grandmother. Emma, I serve the royal family. I've seen that ring before in official photographs. It's a very special piece, and some people are very concerned about where it is." For the first time since Thomas had met her, Emma looked genuinely frightened. "Am I in trouble?" she asked in a small voice. Thomas knelt down to her level, speaking gently. "No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble. But I think there are some things about your family that you haven't told me. And I think some people need to know the truth." Emma was quiet for a long moment, looking out across the fields. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I knew this day would come eventually. Grandmother always said it would." She looked back at Thomas with those wise green eyes. "Do you promise that nothing bad will happen to me if I tell you the truth?" "I promise that I'll do everything in my power to protect you." "Whatever the truth is?" Emma nodded slowly, then sat down on a large stone by the roadside. "My name really is Emma Rose, but that's not my full name. I'm Lady Emma Rose Windsor Mountbatten." Thomas felt his world tilt. Windsor Mountbatten was the Queen's family name. "My father is Colonel James Windsor Mountbatten, the Queen's nephew. My grandmother was Princess Margaret, the Queen's sister." Emma spoke quietly, but with the dignity that Thomas now realized he should have recognized from the beginning. "You think all right." Thomas could barely form the words. "You're a member of the royal family." Emma nodded. "Not a very important one. I'm quite far down the line of succession, and Daddy says that's probably for the best. We live quietly in the country most of the time." Thomas's mind raced as pieces fell into place. "Your father's government work, he's royal protection, isn't he? He's one of the senior protection officers, yes? He travels with various family members when they have official duties abroad. He's been in Canada with Cousin William for the past 2 weeks, and the ring." Emma twisted it on her finger. "Grandmother gave it to me just before she died last year. She said it had been in our family for generations and that I should wear it to remember where I came from, even when I was living simply." Thomas felt a mixture of awe, relief, and embarrassment. "Emma, why didn't you tell me who you were yesterday?" Emma looked at him with an expression far too mature for her years. Would you have let me help you if you'd known? Would you have treated me like a normal person instead of being all formal and careful? Thomas realized she was absolutely right. If he had known her identity, he would have been too concerned with protocol to accept her assistance. Too worried about security to have the natural conversation they had shared. Besides, Emma continued, grandmother always said that titles don't make people better or worse than anyone else. She taught me that true nobility comes from how we treat others, especially when we have nothing to gain from being kind, as if summoned by their conversation. Thomas heard the sound of vehicles approaching. 3 black cars appeared over the hill, moving at high speed. Thomas recognized them immediately as official government vehicles. Emma sighed and stood up, brushing dust from her dress. I suppose someone has been watching us, she said with remarkable calm for a 9-year-old. The cars pulled to a stop. Several men in dark suits emerged. Thomas recognized the civilian from yesterday's meeting, along with Captain Reynolds and another man he didn't know but whose bearing suggested high authority. Lady Emma, the unknown man said, approaching with a respectful bow. Your Highness, we've been very concerned about your whereabouts. Emma straightened to her full height, and Thomas suddenly saw the unmistakable posture of royalty. Sir David, she replied formally, I assume you're here about grandmother's ring. Among other things, Your Highness. Your father has been frantically searching for you since yesterday evening when Mrs. Henderson reported you missing from the cottage. Thomas looked confused. Mrs. Henderson. My governess, Emma explained. She was visiting her sister and wasn't supposed to return until this evening. She must have come back early and found me gone. Sir David nodded. Your father's flying back from Canada as we speak. He's been beside himself with worry. Emma looked genuinely remorseful. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to help Sergeant Thomas. Then I thought I might walk to the village this morning for some supplies. Thomas stepped forward. Sir, if I may, Lady Emma saved my career yesterday. If she hadn't helped me repair my vehicle, I would have been severely disciplined for missing my duty shift. Sir David looked at Thomas with interest. Sergeant Mitchell, isn't it? Your report yesterday started quite a chain of events. Yes, sir. But I had no idea of Lady Emma's identity. She never gave me any indication that she was... that she was a member of the royal family. Sir David finished. No, I imagine she didn't. Lady Emma has something of a reputation for treating everyone as equals. Emma blushed slightly at this. Grandmother taught me that true respect has to be earned, not demanded because of an accident of birth. Captain Reynolds spoke up. Your Highness, we do need to discuss the jewelry situation. Several pieces from Her Majesty's collection were reported missing. Emma reached into her basket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. You mean these? She said, opening it to reveal 3 more pieces of exquisite jewelry, a bracelet, earrings, and a small tiara. Thomas gasped. He had been in the presence of someone carrying items worth more than most people earned in a lifetime, and she had been treating them as casually as pocket change. Grandmother gave them all to me, Emma explained. She said they were mine by right and that I should keep them safe. She was worried that after she died there might be complications about her personal bequests. Sir David and the civilian exchanged glances. Lady Emma, there's been some confusion at the palace. These pieces were listed in the official inventory. When they couldn't be located, someone assumed they were stolen, Emma finished. I suppose grandmother was right to be concerned. Thomas was beginning to understand the delicate situation. Princess Margaret had apparently given her granddaughter valuable royal jewelry without informing the proper authorities, creating a bureaucratic nightmare when the pieces were discovered missing. Your Highness, sir, David said carefully, these items are part of the Crown's collection. While your grandmother certainly had the right to wear them during her lifetime, their ownership after her death is... complex. Emma's expression became sad but resigned. You want them back. It's not a matter of want, Your Highness. It's a matter of protocol and legal requirements. Thomas watched as Emma carefully removed the ring from her finger. For the first time since he had met her, she looked like the child she truly was, small, vulnerable, and about to lose something precious. May I make a suggestion? Thomas said, surprising everyone with his boldness. Sir David looked at him with raised eyebrows. Sergeant, perhaps this is a matter that should be discussed with Her Majesty directly. Lady Emma is her great-niece, and these items were a gift from her beloved sister. Surely the Queen would want to know the full circumstances before any decisions are made about the jewelry's future. Emma looked at Thomas with gratitude. While Sir David appeared thoughtful, that's actually not an unreasonable suggestion, the senior official admitted. Her Majesty has been quite distressed about the missing pieces, not because of their value, but because of their connection to Princess Margaret. Then perhaps, Emma said quietly, we should go and see Great Aunt Elizabeth together. I think she would want to hear this story from both of us. Thomas felt his heart skip. The idea of meeting the Queen face to face, especially under these circumstances, was both terrifying and thrilling. Sir David was already reaching for his phone. I'll make the arrangements. Lady Emma, Sergeant Mitchell, it appears you're both going to have an audience with Her Majesty this afternoon. As they prepared to leave for Windsor Castle, Emma walked over to Thomas. Thank you, she said quietly, for treating me like a person yesterday, and for standing up for me today. Thomas knelt down to her level one last time. Thank you, Lady Emma, for teaching me that true nobility isn't about titles or protocol. It's about kindness, wisdom, and the willingness to help others. Emma smiled. And in that moment, Thomas saw both the remarkable child who had fixed his car and the royal princess she had been born to be. The journey to meet the Queen would be the culmination of an adventure that had begun with a simple breakdown on a country road. But Thomas suspected the real story was just beginning. The drive to Windsor Castle passed in a blur of nervous excitement for Thomas, but Emma seemed perfectly calm. She sat beside him in the official car, pointing out landmarks and chatting about the countryside as if they were simply going on a pleasant outing rather than to meet the sovereign. That's where I learned to ride, Emma said, indicating a field with jumping obstacles. Gretchen Elizabeth taught me herself. She said that anyone in our family should know how to handle a horse properly. Thomas marveled at how casually she mentioned these extraordinary details of her life. Growing up with the Queen as a riding instructor was something most people couldn't even imagine. But for Emma, it was simply family life. As they approached the castle gates, Thomas felt his stomach tighten with nerves. He had served here for 15 years, but always as a guard, observing from the outside. He had never actually been invited into the private royal apartments for an audience. Are you nervous? Emma asked. Noticing his tension, terrified, Thomas admitted honestly. Emma patted his hand with the confidence of someone who had been having tea with the Queen since childhood. Don't be. She's really quite lovely once you get to know her. Just remember to call her Your Majesty the first time, and then ma'am after that. And don't worry about making small talk. She'd guide the conversation. The car passed through several security checkpoints, each one making Thomas more aware of the extraordinary nature of what was happening. Finally, they pulled up to a private entrance where a footman in royal livery waited to escort them inside. The corridors they walked through were magnificent, lined with priceless paintings, furnished with antiques that belonged in museums, and carpeted with rugs that had probably been walked on by centuries of royalty. But Emma moved through it all with familiarity, occasionally waving to staff members who smiled and curtsied as she passed. Lady Emma, a distinguished elderly woman in a dark dress, approached them. Her Majesty is waiting in the blue drawing room. Thank you, Mrs. Phillips, Emma replied politely. Then, turning to Thomas, she whispered, That's the Queen's private secretary. She's worked here longer than anyone can remember. They paused outside an ornate door while Mrs. Phillips announced them. Thomas heard a warm voice from inside say, Please, send them in. The blue drawing room was elegant but comfortable, with afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows. And there, seated in a high-backed chair with a small corgi at her feet, was Queen Elizabeth II. Thomas had seen her countless times from a distance during his guard duties, but up close, her presence was even more remarkable. She wore a simple blue dress with a string of pearls, her white hair perfectly styled and her eyes sharp, intelligent, and took in both visitors with careful attention. Your Majesty, Thomas said, executing his most perfect bow. "Ma'am," Emma said with a graceful curtsy, then broke into a smile. "Hello, Great Aunt Elizabeth." The Queen's face immediately warmed. "Emma, my dear child, come here at once." Emma ran to her great aunt, who embraced her warmly. "We've been so worried about you. Your father has been beside himself." "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to cause such a fuss. I was just trying to help." The Queen looked over Emma's head at Thomas. "And you must be Sergeant Mitchell. I understand we have you to thank for keeping Emma safe and bringing this situation to our attention. Your Majesty, Lady Emma saved me yesterday when my vehicle broke down. I had no idea of her identity, but she showed remarkable knowledge and kindness." The Queen smiled, still holding Emma close. "That doesn't surprise me in the least. Emma has always been exceptionally bright and helpful." Margaret was very proud of her. At the mention of her grandmother, Emma's expression became sad. "Ma'am, I brought grandmother's jewelry. They told me it might not really be mine to keep." Emma produced the velvet pouch and began laying out the pieces on a small table, the ring Thomas had first noticed, along with the bracelet, earrings, and delicate tiara. The Queen examined each piece with obvious emotion. "I remember when our grandmother first gave these to Margaret for her 18th birthday, the Queen said softly. "She wore them on some of her happiest occasions. Grandmother said they were mine by right," Emma said quietly. "But she also said that rights and responsibilities go together, that I should always do what's best for the family." The Queen studied her great-niece carefully. "Emma, what do you think would be best for the family?" Emma was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking hard. "I think," she said finally, "that these beautiful things should be somewhere safe, where future generations can appreciate them. But I also think that grandmother wanted me to have something to remember her by." The Queen nodded approvingly. "A very wise answer. And what would you suggest?" "Perhaps the pieces could go into the official collection where they'll be properly cared for. But maybe I could borrow them for special occasions. When I'm older and can take better care of them myself." Thomas watched this exchange with amazement. Here was a 9-year-old child discussing matters of state treasure with the Queen of England, and both were treating it as a perfectly natural family conversation. "I think that's an excellent solution," the Queen agreed. "The pieces will be kept safe in the collection, but they'll be designated as yours to use when appropriate occasions arise." Emma beamed. "Thank you, ma'am. I think grandmother would be happy with that arrangement." The Queen turned to Thomas. "Sergeant Mitchell, I understand that Emma repaired your vehicle yesterday." "Yes, Your Majesty. She showed remarkable mechanical knowledge and problem-solving skills. Without her help, I would have missed my duty shift." "And how did she treat you, not knowing that you served the crown?" Thomas glanced at Emma, who was playing with the corgi that had come to investigate the newcomers. "She treated me with kindness and respect, Your Majesty. She asked for nothing in return, and seemed genuinely happy to help someone in need." The Queen's eyes sparkled with pride. "That, Sergeant, is exactly what I would expect from any member of this family. Emma has clearly learned the most important lesson of all, that true service comes from the heart, not from obligation." As their audience continued, Thomas found himself relaxing despite the surreal nature of the situation. The Queen asked Emma about her studies, her interests, and her plans for the future. She inquired about Thomas's military service and his family. It was, in many ways, like any grandmother, chatting with visiting relatives, except that this particular grandmother happened to rule a kingdom. When it came time to leave, the Queen had one final surprise. "Sergeant Mitchell, I understand that your exemplary service and discretion in this matter deserve recognition. I'm recommending you for promotion to Staff Sergeant, effective immediately." Thomas was speechless. "Your Majesty, thank you. It's been an honor to serve. The honor has been mine, Staff Sergeant. And Emma," the Queen turned to her great-niece, "you will always be welcome here. This is your family home as much as it is mine." As they prepared to leave, Emma hugged her great-aunt goodbye. "Ma'am, may I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. Yesterday, Sergeant Thomas told me about how dedicated you are to serving others, even when it's difficult. How do you do it? How do you always put duty first?" The Queen considered the question seriously. "Emma, The secret is understanding that true duty isn't a burden, it's a privilege. When we serve others with genuine love and dedication, we find meaning and joy in even the most challenging moments. She looked at both Emma and Thomas. Both of you demonstrated that yesterday in your own ways. Emma, you served by helping someone in need. Thomas, you served by reporting a situation that could have had serious implications. True service recognizes no boundaries of age, rank, or circumstance. As they left the castle, Thomas felt transformed by the experience. He had begun this adventure as a guardsman doing his job, but he was ending it with a deeper understanding of what service truly meant. Emma, walking beside him toward the waiting car, seemed thoughtful. Sergeant Thomas, Staff Sergeant Thomas, do you think we'll see each other again? Thomas smiled at this remarkable child who had changed his life in just 2 days. I hope so, Lady Emma. And if you ever need help with another broken-down car, you know where to find me. Emma laughed, the sound bright and joyful in the afternoon air. Next time, I'll make sure to introduce myself properly from the beginning. As they drove away from Windsor Castle, Thomas reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them together. A simple mechanical breakdown had led to a friendship that crossed all boundaries of age and social station, and ultimately to an audience with the Queen herself. But perhaps most importantly, it had taught him that true nobility, whether born or earned, was measured not by titles or possessions, but by the willingness to help others, to act with kindness and integrity, and to serve something greater than oneself. Emma Rose Windsor Mountbatten, the little girl who had helped a royal guard fix his Land Rover, had taught him lessons about service, humility, and genuine nobility that would guide him for the rest of his life. And in return, Thomas had helped ensure that a precious family legacy would be preserved for future generations. While a remarkable child maintained her connection to her beloved grandmother's memory, it was, Thomas thought, as they drove through the English countryside, exactly the kind of story that the Queen herself would approve of. One where duty, kindness, and family loyalty triumphed above all else.